Law enforcement were all local sheriffs that were busy coordinating defensive efforts. The city police were too busy holding the bridge. The bridge had almost immediately been taken over by a gang. I think I heard they had clogged it up by the first night and completely inaccessible within 3 days. Any attempt to pass through it or siege it was suicide without tanks or strikers, which we had none. There possibly could have been more help from the sheriff, but he had sold us out the prior year to the neoliberals as the demographics of the county changed. Gone were strong laws of enforcing legal immigration, replaced with another copy-paste sanctuary city that weakened it to the point of essentially no resources. All of the task forces that would have bolstered reserves had been diverted to counties still supporting federal rule of law. No gang task force, no organized crime task force, no organized terrorism task force. Everything had been focused on hate crimes, which there were statistically zero, even by their own metrics, to appease their new core voters. Apparently, over the first few nights, strategic swathes of the inner city were surrendered to prevent essentially a genocide of the displaced citizens. Some people thought it was deserved because blank was here first. Never mind that the land had traded hands so many times before we even got here. It was easy to notice that none of the people so ready to kick others out were in a rush to give them a spot in their own home either. Within a week, it had turned into a free-for-all when it became obvious this was long-term, so the least law enforcement could do is keep them out of parts of our city. Realizing it was now an all or nothing, that's what the remainder of city law enforcement had been trying to do. There were 2 bridges, so they were stretched thin. The 3rd and 4th bridge never got completed due to corruption, and the main bridge never got renovated and taxed, although it had come close a few times. None of that mattered now. There were local folks helping them hold the bridge, but the problem is that pulls from the people holding the neighborhoods. It was a logistical nightmare when you had so few of the population ready and willing to defend itself. The thought reminded me to ask the folks at this checkpoint if they had heard any news from the Southern Front, which is what we referenced the bridges to the south. Everyone looked at each other and shrugged, and then the guy that was taking lead for this junction spoke up. He talked about how they hadn't heard anything from the next furthest out checkpoints for a few days, and they should have checked in by now. They had sent scouts to go check, encountered enemy patrols, and had to come back before any verification. The numbers varied between 10 to 20 raiders with backpacked radios and a few long guns. That prompted our nearest checkpoint to stage additional security precautions, figuring nobody would be falling back to their spot any longer, short of a miracle. The lead at the checkpoint explained that they had taken nails and spikes and driven them into the fallen trees across the road to the west that separated the junction from the freeway. That would keep the trees from easily getting separated. He then said they took some extra rope and tied those together also. He showed me some pictures from his phone and then tried to get me to look at the blockade through his rifle scope. I thanked him but declined. I've always been horrible seeing things through a scope. It made my head hurt just thinking about it. I got out my durable pair of travel binoculars. I had been practicing adjusting them. They still gave me a headache if I didn't do it right. But I could sort of get them to work now. I unfolded and tweaked the binoculars so they would line up with my eyes properly. I was able to see it okay as it came into picture and gave me a slight wave of vertigo. I told him it looked pretty good, but I didn't say much more. I knew that he had some fighting positions up closer if people tried to dismantle it or tried to make contact, but probably the whole group here didn't need to know that. Loose lips sink ships, I repeated to myself in my head. It would have been fun to talk about the fighting positions, but there were others around and I didn't know if they knew, so I let it slide out of respect. I let the junction commander know that those measures seemed very reasonable, as everyone that was supposed to be here was most assuredly here by now. He agreed, still looking through his scope. I put my binoculars back away in my pack. I asked if anyone had anything else to report, and that we didn't have anything. I realized I'd been doing most of the talking and interviewing, but that's just what I was used to doing. Nobody seemed to mind. Nobody had anything else to say, it appeared, so I told everyone that they were doing a good job. I noticed that there hadn't been a pre-dawn strike, with the sun now fully up. Everyone nodded and seemed very thankful that a routine and a few extra folks were still active. With that, I saluted everyone just to make them happy. It always made me happy, and everyone got a kick out of it, and we all went back on our ways. Chapter 5, Heading Back to Base. Morning, Day 1. We started our walk back, opting for the other side of the road to keep our entry and exit on 2 different avenues. This would go a lot faster since we could actually see where we were going. I thought back to several weeks ago when I was walking around in the dark, not wanting to head back to my home. Now I had just walked a good portion of that distance in the complete dark. It's crazy when it's light out to see how far I had actually walked in the dark just a little while ago. As we walked down the shoulder, I thought about how my headaches hadn't been as bad. I wondered if it was the EMF or electromagnetic frequencies that had been causing my headaches. They were almost all gone now that the power was out. I still had headaches for other reasons like pressure and vertigo, but most of my headaches seemed to be gone. It was neat. I adjusted my hat to make sure it was still blocking out the sun, though. The sun would still probably give me somewhat of a headache, although I had been getting used to it. I had a boonie hat that blocked the sun from all directions and absolutely loved it. I'd been out camping and noticed that I hadn't had a camping hat. Going through training, everyone was teasing me because they could see me in the brush wearing my urban camo. I wasn't the only person that only had urban camo on, though, solely due to city operations. So I got this hat on sale from the same company that made my other hat, and it was the right kind of camo for where we lived. The next time we went out for training, nobody could see me at all. Mission success. And also, it had the added bonus of keeping the sun out of my eyes, and the sun off my ears, and the sun off my neck at the same time. Such a genius hat. Also, the warmer it got outside, the better my hat worked to keep me cool. I loved it so much, and it had a chin strap and everything. So as I walked, I tweaked my hat to keep the sun out of my eyes. This is while listening for potential issues and trying to watch for traps and everything else we had to do. I heard my comm hissing at me in my right ears. We were crossing the bridge over the creek and realized my volume had been screwed up again. I couldn't have it too loud or blow my head off and give me an excruciating migraine, but if I had it too low, I could only hear the radio static breaking. We finished our bridge crossing as I tweaked my volume, making sure to keep an eye out. Though I could be slightly less attentive to detail. Not that I could actually see. We both got in the brush on the other side. My partner looked at me, pointed at his ear, and said, "It's for you." I thought that I got my volume set up properly and went to give it a try. "This is India 589er. I didn't copy last. Please repeat." Hotel Bravo to India 589. What's your location, over? I looked at my partner and he nodded, and I tweaked my volume just slightly so it was comfortable and I could still hear well. India 589. Is it phase line November at India 58? Over. I said, adding into the comms in third person. Copy India 589. Sit tight, evac in 5, over. I responded, copy, sit tight, evac in 5, out. Roger, out. We were both already at the creek's miniature ravine, which was phase line November. We had tried to think of an easy marker identifier so people didn't have to memorize new names for everything. This was our north phase line between our subdivision and the road junction. There was a south phase line also between us and the next subdivision. We both hunkered down and waited, not having seen or heard anything around us that was of concern. So basically I told them that I was at our north phase line and they could figure out the intersection location I was the nearest to. It was definitely a lot easier than memorizing tons upon tons of phase lines and intersections, or having to carry around maps to everything. I had assumed that they would come up with some command maps as soon as we had the means to. Some birds were singing their life story to each other, or where they saw last food, I couldn't tell which. It made me feel good to hear them while wading in the cold, damp earth and grass mixture.